And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again, the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel a third time, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy, so Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down. And if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling at the other times, as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And then God begins to tell Samuel a message that he has for Samuel to deliver to Eli and to some other people. By extension, God is going to begin a journey with Samuel of revealing himself to Samuel through his word and through his presence. That's the stuff we looked at last week. But today, I want you to recognize Samuel's reaction through this whole process. He hears a voice and he runs to Eli. Eli says, "No, it's not me. Go back, lie down." He hears the voice again. So he goes back to Eli. He hears the voice again. He goes back to Eli. 3 times he goes back to Eli until finally Eli says, "No, it's not me." And then, when he realizes that this voice might be God, he says, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." That's the attitude I want us to grab onto today. This attitude that says, if I hear the voice, I'm going to run to it. And I'm going to keep running until I identify whether it's God or not. I'm going to keep pursuing this. I'm going to chase after it. Like Samuel would chase after the voice that he thought was coming from the other room, but was really coming from right where he was. It's that kind of pursuit I want you to engage in. A few years back, my son was born, and I had to decide what kind of parent I would be. And I chose that I was going to be one of the parents who experiments with his kids. And I decided that I was going to fix all of the mistakes of my own upbringing by repairing him and making sure that he had exactly everything psychologically sound and wholesome and everything. And John, I feel for your son. Or whichever, do you know what you do? Son, I feel for him, man. I feel for him. So, because John's a psychiatrist, psychologist type dude, and he's going to analyze the dickens out of this kid. But so I didn't have the kind of research on my side. I was just doing random experiments. But one experiment that I thought would be noble was this: that I never grew up with the sense that God would speak to me. I never grew up with that either emotional or spiritual sense that God was going to speak to me if I gave him the chance. Instead, I grew up in an environment, a church environment, that basically just said, the Bible's all you got and that's all you need. And even though I'm firmly committed to the Bible, I never grew up in an environment that said it was okay to just listen to what God might be saying to you in your heart. And so I told you this last week a little bit, but I spent a lot of time trying to research and figure out what it means to hear God speak to you. And I decided I was going to take a completely different tack when I had my first child. Because I thought I could just maybe, since he's all innocent and stuff, maybe I could get him to hear God's voice. And if I started early enough with him, maybe he would develop this into a habit and to a sense of reality there. So I took an experiment one night. He was about 3 years old. I'm putting him in bed. We read the Bible together, and we're getting ready to pray. And I said, "Charlie, before we pray, I'm going to try something here. We're just going to be real quiet. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to see if God says anything to us." And I said, "How's that sound?" He said, "Okay." So, and he wasn't generally in the mood for being really quiet all the time, just sitting still. So I thought, this is a little bit of an experiment. Let's try it. So we quieted down. He's sitting next to me. And I said, if you hear anything, if you feel like God's saying something to you, just say Daddy, and whichever one of us hears something first, we'll stop it and share it with the other person. So we get real quiet. I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's going to happen? And about 20 seconds later, Charlie says, "Dad, I think I heard something." And I was freaked out a little bit. I was a little freaked out, a little jealous, but a little freaked out too. And so I said, "So what'd you hear?" He said, God told me he loved me. He just said, I love you. And I'm sitting over here and I'm like, dude, I want that. Okay? So he was 3 years old, and I thought, okay, the experiment worked. Let's do this again. So we didn't do it every night. I was busy often doing like small group Bible studies and stuff in the evening with people, and so I didn't put Charlie in bed every night. Some nights that I did put him in bed, I didn't remember to do this exercise because it was new to me anyway. But about 3 times that year, we tried it, and every time we did it, the same thing happened. After about 20 seconds, he would say, I heard God say, I love you. And I was like, wow, this is just cool. And then we moved. Not too long after that, we moved down here from Chicago, and in the process of the relocation, the move, and a bunch of other stuff that was going on in our lives, I didn't really think about it, but I remember that right before we made that move, I realized, we should probably do this exercise again. And so he was about 5 years old, I think, at the time, and we sat down and we did the quiet thing, and after about 30 seconds, he started crying. And I said, Charlie, what's wrong? He said, I didn't hear anything. And my heart broke. And I was like, and so we tried it one other time, and he didn't hear anything. He didn't hear God speak to him at all. And then I gave up on it. I stopped. It's like I didn't want that kind of heartbreak in my son, that kind of disappointment. I talked to him just about a month ago as I was preparing for this series, and I asked him about that. I said, do you remember that time? And he remembered it totally. I said, what was that like? And he said, it was like there was someone behind me, kind of like right behind my head. It wasn't that he was making up these thoughts. It was literally, he could remember the experience when he heard God speak to him. He was remembering that, and it was literally, he could feel like there was a person sort of in the back of my head, was the way he described it. He said, I heard a voice in the back of my head that said, I love you. So he remembers that vividly, and he also remembers the moments of silence. And I asked him for permission to share this story. He said, yeah, you can share this story. He was in this adult service last week and thought I was going to share it last week and was a little disappointed that I didn't. So I told him I was going to share it this week. But this is the thing, okay? I realized the lesson through that experience, and it's something that I still struggle with. I'm afraid of the silence. And the fear of the silence causes me to stop the pursuit. But fear of the pursuit guarantees me the silence. If I never seek out God, I'll never hear God.